Bryan Mbeumo hit the woodwork 7 times in 11 Premier League games. 7. Not bad luck. A pattern. Defenders watched him graze the post over and over and decided he wasn't the problem. 6 years later, Manchester United handed Brentford £71 million to make sure he became somebody else's problem entirely. So what actually happened between the crossbar and the transfer fee? Between a kid who couldn't buy a goal and a forward Premier League defenders now scout like a live threat? Everyone talks about the price tag. Nobody talks about the version of Mbeumo that almost never existed, the one buried under injury, under a teammate's ban, under a missed penalty that should have ended him. This is that story. His path explains why the back four at Anfield went quiet in the first minute of a match that used to be unwinnable. Go back to August 2019. Brentford, a club that had spent decades as championship furniture, spends a record £5.8 million on a 20-year-old winger from Troyes, a French side then competing in the second tier. Nobody threw a parade. Nobody wrote a headline. Brentford had bought unknown French forwards before and watched them fade into reserve football. Why would this one be different? Brentford didn't do romantic signings. They ran spreadsheets before they ran scouting trips, and every recruitment decision passed through data models most clubs hadn't even considered yet. Mbeumo cleared those models. But clearing a spreadsheet and clearing the eye test in English football are two completely different tests, and nobody at that point could promise he'd pass both. What he brought instead was a work rate nobody had bothered to measure and a stubbornness that would define the next 6 years of his career. Within a season, he formed 1/3 of the most feared front line in the championship. Paired with Saïd Benrahma and Ollie Watkins, Brentford fans gave the trio a nickname, BMW. By July 2020, that front three had scored 58 goals between them in a single championship campaign. 58. From a club that wasn't supposed to compete for promotion at all. But football doesn't reward you for the regular season. Brentford reached the playoff final and lost it, 2-1 to Fulham. Heartbreak. The kind that ends careers before they start, because two of that front three, Benrahma and Watkins, would leave within months for West Ham and Aston Villa. Mbeumo stayed. He watched his strike partners cash in and walk away while he stuck around for another shot. That shot came 11 months later, May 29th, 2021. Brentford beat Swansea City 2-0 in the playoff final and finally reached the Premier League, 74 years after their last appearance in the English top flight. Mbeumo hadn't scored the goals that got the headlines that day, but he'd earned the right to find out if he belonged at the top level at all. So how does a player who stayed loyal through heartbreak end up defining an entire evolution? Subscribe now. His rise was about to get uncomfortable fast. Mbeumo's first season in the Premier League should have been a coronation. Instead, it became a running joke. 7 times in his first 11 matches, the ball crashed off the frame of the goal instead of going in. By the end of that 2021 to 2022 season, he'd tied Rafinha for the most woodwork hits in the entire league. Think about what that does to a young forward's head. Every commentator, every pundit, every stat graphic reduces you to a punchline about bad luck. Mbeumo didn't hide from it either. He came out and admitted, plainly, that he needed work on his finishing. No excuses, no blaming the woodwork, no blaming the pitch. Just an honest admission that something in his technique wasn't matching his instincts yet. Behind the scenes, that meant extra shooting drills after every single session, video reviews of his own misses on a loop most players would refuse to watch twice. Nobody filmed that part. Nobody put it in a highlight package. That kind of self-diagnosis is rare in a 22-year-old under public scrutiny. It's also exactly the mindset that turns a nearly man into a real threat. Because the shots were as it did, defenders stopped laughing. May 2023. Ivan Toney, Brentford's talisman and top scorer, gets hit with an 8-month ban for betting breaches. Gone. Just like that. The club's whole attacking identity built around one man, and suddenly that man can't play. Everyone outside the building assumed Brentford would collapse without him. Sounds reasonable, right? Remove your top scorer and the whole structure crumbles. Except Mbeumo, then Brentford's key attacker, didn't let that happen. He stood in front of the media and said the squad had to take responsibility. Not Tony's absence, not misfortune. Responsibility. Overnight, a supporting winger became the emotional center of the attack, whether he'd asked for that role or not. That's not a tactical shift. That's a psychological one. And it's the difference between a talented player and a leader, because talent doesn't step forward when the cameras are rolling and the team needs someone to carry the weight. Leadership does. And leadership under pressure doesn't come with a manual. Mbeumo had never captained a Premier League squad through a crisis before, and there was no guarantee the group would even follow him. They did. December 6th, 2023. A match against Brighton, and Mbeumo goes down with a serious ankle injury. 97 days on the sidelines. 97 days of watching from the outside as he was becoming the player his then club Brentford needed most. Worse, that injury robbed him of the 2024 Africa Cup of Nations with Cameroon, a tournament that would have put him in front of the full footballing world wearing his country's shirt. Instead, he rehabbed in silence while his national team competed without him. No cameras, no headlines. Just the grinding, invisible work of getting a joint back to full strength while your career window keeps ticking. Some players never recover their sharpness after an injury like that. Mbeumo came back and immediately looked like a different level of player entirely. If this kind of quiet resilience is hitting different, take a second to hit like. It genuinely helps this story reach more people. The 2024 to 2025 season turned the anomaly into hard evidence. 20 goals, 7 assists, 27 goal contributions across 38 Premier League appearances, breaking a Brentford record that Ivan Toney himself had set. But scoring numbers only tell part of it. Mbeumo ranked among Brentford's primary attacking outlets that season, establishing himself as one of the most active attacking threats in the league. Second, behind Salah. Add 351 progressive passes received, and you see a player pulling the ball forward into dangerous zones over and over, forcing defenders into decisions they didn't want to make. For context, Brentford had spent the previous decade selling their best players before they turned 25, cashing in and rebuilding from scratch almost every transfer window. Mbeumo broke that cycle simply by getting better than the market expected, year after year, until selling him became a financial event instead of a formality. This is the season that erased every joke about the woodwork, and the form that made Manchester United move to sign him in the summer transfer window. July 21st, 2025. Manchester United pays £71 million, 65 guaranteed plus 6 in add-ons, to bring Mbeumo to Old Trafford on a 5-year deal. That's not a squad rotation signing, that's a statement. Then manager Ruben Amorim had specifically requested him, needing a direct, vertical wide forward to fit his narrow 3-4-2-1 system, a shape that lives or dies on players who can win one-on-one duels in transition. United bet the club's direction on a player whose whole game is built around risk. It also meant exposure at the back. Amorim's shape asked wide forwards to defend in wider zones with less cover, and any drop in form there would get magnified instantly under a microscope nobody at Brentford had ever pointed at him. Every driving run into the box, every early shot, every gamble on beating a defender in a foot race, that's the profile Amorim wanted. High reward, high exposure. Mbeumo had roughly 3 weeks to prove himself. His first major test arrived fast, and it was brutal. August 27th, 2025. Manchester United, fresh off a major summer signing, a fourth-tier side worth a combined €4 million. A marathon penalty shootout that ended 12-11. And it's Mbeumo who steps up to take the decisive one. He misses. Final score, 12-11 to Grimsby. A club from League Two knocking out a team that had just spent more on one player than Grimsby's entire squad was worth, combined, several times over. The headlines wrote themselves. The most expensive gamble of United's summer, undone by a fourth-tier goalkeeper and his own nerve on a spot kick nobody outside England had heard of a week earlier. That's the kind of moment that ends careers in the tabloids before they've even properly started. Mbeumo had about a month of Manchester United football under his belt, and already the doubters had their headline ready. 6 weeks later, he answered the doubters. August 27th, 2025. Blundell Park. A ground where Manchester United hadn't won since 2016, nearly a decade of failure inside that stadium. First minute of the match, Mbeumo scores. United win 2-1. The same player who'd missed a key penalty against Grimsby Town earlier that season just silenced one of the loudest stadiums in football before most fans had even settled into their seats. That's not redemption by accident. That's a player who refused to let one missed kick define him, the same stubbornness that got him through early career setbacks and 97 days of rehab. United's situation shifted again. January 5th, 2026, Ruben Amorim, the manager who'd built his approach around signing Mbeumo, gets sacked about 5.5 months after the transfer went through. That system no longer had its architect. Yet by May 2026, Mbeumo finished the season with 12 goals in all competitions, level with Benjamin Sesko as United's joint top scorer under a completely different tactical setup than the one he'd signed for. Heading into the new season, scouts across the league now flag him as United's primary vertical threat. The winger who used to hit the woodwork is now the reason defenders adjust their entire shape before kickoff. Go back to that kid who couldn't beat the frame of the goal, back when everyone assumed he was a nearly man who'd never convert the big moments. Compare back, or the one who absorbed a humiliating penalty miss against a fourth-tier side and came back sharper within weeks. That's not the same player. That's not even the same psychology. Every setback, the injury, the missed penalty, the ban that forced him into leadership overnight got absorbed and converted into fuel instead of an excuse. Ask any scouting department in this league right now what worries them about facing Manchester United, and Mbeumo's name comes up before anyone mentions the striker. Not reputation. Film. Hours of it, all pointing the same direction. Defenders aren't scared of Mbeumo because of one highlight reel. They're scared because every time football has tried to break him, he's come back more dangerous than before. Was the Grimsby penalty a tragic footnote, or proof this player refuses to stay down for long? Was Amorim sacking the end of a system built specifically for him, or the moment Mbeumo proved he never needed one man's tactics to succeed? A player mocked for hitting the woodwork 7 times is now the reason Premier League defenders adjust their entire shape before kickoff. That's the real evolution here. £5.8 million out of the ones you want more of. Hit like and subscribe.